We hope everyone's having a fantastic week. Last week we talked about malpractice coverage and understanding the primary differences between occurrence and claims-made policies. We covered that then. This week I'm going to talk about provisions and things to watch for, not just the provisions, also about the company themselves when you choose your malpractice carrier, whether you're changing, whether you're thinking about changing, whether you just want to make sure that you have the coverage that you want and you need in your office. First of all is you want to make sure that the company is financially viable. The way to do that is really just look at their AM Best rating. That's a company that really does this for a living. It's what they do, is analyze the financials of the insurance companies to make sure that they can meet the obligations that they may incur. And so you just simply Google AM Best rating and whatever insurance carrier that you have or are looking at to determine their AM Best rating. It should be at least an A- or better. So A-, A plus in that realm. Less than that, then it should definitely at least draw concerns for you. Now, other things to watch for are actually in the coverage itself. One of the things that we saw happen about a decade ago, and really haven't seen a whole lot from this company in the last many years, really, but it was a malpractice carrier that required chiropractic physicians in Illinois to sign an agreement to say that they would not diagnose. And if they did diagnose, then they wouldn't have malpractice coverage for those particular cases. Well, the problem with that is in Illinois, you're a physician, and so you are required to diagnose under the Medical Practice Act. So by signing that agreement, in essence, you're agreeing to violate the Medical Malpractice Act, the Medical Practice Act of 1987, which then would probably put you in violation of the malpractice carrier's policy anyway. So you may be signing an agreement that would put it to where you could not get coverage for anything. So be careful. That is a clause that I would tell you, set that one aside. Don't sign up with that company if they require you to sign away your requirement to diagnose the patient. Another clause to watch for is your consent to settle. And this is really a big one. This is your ability to determine when it's time to settle. So the insurance company may come back with a recommendation that they believe that you should accept to settle a malpractice case. And if you sit back and you go, I don't want to settle, that indicates maybe that I'm guilty, or you have that feeling. Some companies require you to take that settlement. So you want to watch for that. What are the exceptions to your consent to settle? Are there things like what they call a hammer clause or a modified hammer clause? Those are the clauses that say that you'll pay the difference. So if they make a recommendation to settle for X amount and later on there's a judgment or a higher settlement because you refuse to settle at point one, then you're agreeing that you will pay the difference. Of course, those differences could be substantial and could put you into a position of serious financial concern. And so be wary of those particular clauses as well, or at least know that you're getting into that when you sign up originally. Hammer clauses and modified hammer clauses. Additionally, what about if there's clauses in there and exceptions if you are quote unquote being unreasonable? And some of those are written differently, but basically if they believe that you're being unreasonable, that they can actually force you to settle. You want to know that going in, and you want to agree to it up front and say, if I'm going to be unreasonable, then yeah, I'm willing to let you make that decision for me. But if having that really pure consent to settle is important to you, watch for those clauses that don't have exceptions. Other things that may come up in the consent to settle section, maybe board approval. In other words, that you have to consent to settle if they have a board of physicians that agree that you should settle in this particular case. Typically, the board works for them. And may not necessarily be independent, or whatever it is. At least you know going in what some of those requirements are, what some of those exceptions are to the settlement. Another one is arbitration clause. In other words, if you don't agree to the settlement, that actually you can go through arbitration, and then the arbitrator can ultimately decide whether or not you should settle that particular case. So be careful, at least knowing. I'm not telling you to avoid those, but know going in what those clauses mean and what those exceptions do in those particular cases. Some insurance companies, now this is slightly different, but some malpractice carriers require you to have the patient sign an arbitration clause. And basically that means that the patient signing away their right to be able to take you to court in a malpractice case, but instead is going to go through and agree to binding arbitration. Just know that could be in some of the insurance policies, and it's something to consider when you're comparing. Lastly is this, and this is a really important one, is if you're faced with something that you believe is going to happen, or maybe you get an early hint that maybe a patient is going to file some sort of a claim, don't be shy. What we've seen a lot of times is doctors start to get concerned. I don't want to open a case with a malpractice carrier. I don't want to run into any problems. I don't want them to increase my premium just because I think that maybe there's a problem. What we've seen is sometimes when doctors start to be fearful of contacting their malpractice carrier when they have a concern, is they make mistakes. And you don't want to be one of the doctors that inadvertently makes a mistake and puts yourself in greater financial difficulty simply because you didn't call the insurance company early enough and didn't get the advice early enough in that process. That's really important. A lot of times those insurance companies, and you can check with them, I'd encourage you to call them and just find out. But a lot of times those insurance companies don't really open a case until there is an official notice of claim, where really attorneys are involved at this stage, and that's really at that step where the malpractice carrier begins to open a claim, and when that process would click off down the road, and we'd have to involve the malpractice carrier officially, but involve them early. Help yourself not make mistakes in those areas that maybe are avoidable. So maybe you never get to that notice of claim, and maybe you never get to the lawsuit because you handle things appropriately up front. Those are the things I'd watch out for in policies, and also encourage you to do throughout the process if in the terrible event that something were to happen. Any questions you have, of course, always give us a call here at the office, and we'll do our best to get you the right information and head you down the road. You take care, and we'll catch you next week.